everyone, it's Madam Berry. I am back with another Critical Role speed paint because I couldn't resist painting Mollymauk. So this is gonna be a really long video. Just a heads up, go get a coffee, go get some snackies, go, get comfy. I tried my best to edit this down. It was like 15 hours of footage. This took a long ass time to paint. Also, apparently I don't know how to keep my head out of the frame, so I'm sorry. I did live stream some of this painting, so at some point you're going to start seeing live stream footage, which, while slightly lower quality, at least doesn't have my head in the frame all the time. For this painting, I used the Arteza 24 set of gouache. Arteza? I don't know how to pronounce that brand. I don't know if anybody knows how to pronounce that brand, honestly. The paper that I'm working on is the Strathmore 300 series watercolor paper. It is 140 pound paper, or 300 GSM. And what I did was I actually glued around the edges, like painted glue around the edges to make it into kind of a homemade watercolor block. If enough people are interested, I could maybe show y'all how to do that. This isn't my first time using gouache. I used a 3-color set of Holbein gouache. It was primary yellow, magenta, and cyan, and I had to mix every single hue I ever wanted to use. I didn't love that set. I didn't hate it, but I didn't really understand how to use it, because in mixing every single color, just by default, to keep the paint wet, I had to add more water to it in order to pick it up and mix it with another color. So it ended up acting a lot more like watercolor, and I just didn't really understand how to use gouache the way everybody else was using it. I got the Arteza set for my birthday recently, and I guess I really like gouache now? People say commonly that gouache is kind of like a mix between acrylic paint and watercolor, and after using this set, I can really see that in a way that I wasn't able to see it before, because I was only using it with a lot of water. Before I thought it was just kind of like, oh, it's just opaque watercolor, big whoop. But even though I squeezed the tubes of paint into a palette and let them dry, and worked out of a dry palette, just not having to mix every single shade of purple and green and orange myself, I can pick up a lot more of the pigment, and I actually understand how people use it like acrylic with thick, opaque strokes. I think gouache combines some of my favorite aspects of watercolor and acrylic. I like that it's re-wettable. I can work out of a palette. I don't have to worry about my paints drying on me like acrylic. I don't have to keep spraying them down so they don't dry out on me while I'm working. I like that you can get those bold strokes that you can get with acrylic paint without the downsides of worrying about your acrylic going dry and plasticky on you. Also, I like that gouache doesn't get goopy. Just saying. It does lift very easily though. If you have dry paint on your paper and you paint over top of it, it is going to lift off the paper if you work on it too much. And the color you put down isn't always the color that it dries into. If you paint white on top of another color, it's probably going to kind of sink into that color and turn off white. Hold up. Oh Christ, what am I doing? It was difficult to find reference for Mollymauk's back tattoos. Molly's peacock tattoo at least had some official art for it, and was fairly easy to reference, but there was only Taliesin's description of his back tattoo in that one episode at the bathhouse, I think, and everybody's interpretation of it is different. So it was kind of difficult to find reference for it, and as such I ended up having to interpret it myself in my own way. Taliesin described it as a pyramid with an eye inside of it, and another illuminated eye above it, with a sun and moon cresting the shoulder blades, I think. So that's basically what I did. I tied them all together with kind of a sort of Wheel of the Year or sun and moon cycle inspired circle that I ended up filling in blue at the last minute because I thought it needed something, and I chose blue so it would kind of be like the sun or the moon was on a sky, but mostly it was to help add some contrast. So because this is almost my first time using gouache, not quite, but almost, I learned a lot about gouache doing this painting. Particularly when it comes to working around the limitations of gouache lifting off the page so easily. I learned that water control is very important. It's important in watercolor in that you want to make sure the paint is spreading and distributing the way that you want it to. So you have to control the water on the page and in your brush, but with gouache, you really have to control the water on your brush because if it's too wet, it'll lift it off the page. I learned that I always want to have some kind of pigment on the brush when I'm blending, otherwise it will lift it off the page. There's a running theme here. I also developed a technique where I blend with feathery strokes towards the area that I want to blend, because if I put down paint and then try to blend it outwards, it wets that paint and then it pulls it off the page. It pulls it away from where I want it to go. So I put down the paint and then I start blending inwards towards the area I want to go. And then when I do notice that I'm starting to pull paint off of the page, I load my brush with pigment and then I kind of just dab it on. I pat the paint onto the page. Say that 3 times fast. Pat the paint onto the page. But that way it gets the pigment back on the page, and then I just let that dry. I don't touch it until it's dry, and then I can go back and work on it later. I also discovered that as you're blending 2 colors, your brush will kind of pick up whatever color is already on the paper. So if you're blending yellow into a red, you're eventually going to end up with orange on your brush. The flowers in the background and foreground, the ones in the foreground are chrysanthemums, which are a fairly common funeral flower. They symbolize mourning in a lot of cultures. And then there are 2 lycoris flowers. I also don't know how to pronounce that. Lycoris? I'm really not sure. And lycoris is also another flower of mourning and remembrance, and I think it also suits Molly for its stark crimson color. And then the last flower, which I added pretty last minute, is a snapdragon, and I added that in because at a recent live Talks Machina show, Taliesin said that snapdragon is the flower that Molly would want left by his grave, and that he really likes snapdragon. So I added that in there. I was like, well, I have to add that. That's all I really have to say about this piece. There's no way I'm gonna fill 45 minutes with commentary, so I'm gonna let the rest of this video play out. If you like what you're seeing here, be sure to hit subscribe. I currently upload once a month. And consider supporting this channel and my other work by becoming my patron on Patreon. You can also find me on Twitter, where I post randomly throughout the day, occasionally with cat pics, and Twitch, where I stream every Wednesday and Saturday. And you can find my prints on Redbubble. Thanks everyone for watching, and take care!